welcome everyone. Good evening. Welcome to another edition of On the Trail in Search of Living Legends. It's going to be season 4, episode 5. I am here with my partner, co-host, Mr. Nick Valente. Nick, what's going on, brother?
Hey, doing good, Jeremiah. We got a really good guest coming on tonight.
We sure do. We have Mr. Darrell Denton. Daryl, how's it going? It's an honor to be on the show, buddy.
Well, it's a real honor to me to be on your show. I appreciate you inviting me, and appreciate you being involved with my group and helping me. And Nick, the same thing. I've been with him since the start of the North American Dog Project, and I enjoy both being with both of y'all. So I appreciate you giving me being on your show.
It's mutual, man. You got a good groove going for yourself right now. Nick and I were just talking about that before the show started. All of us working together in the community, it's the only way we're going to find answers, as opposed to everyone bickering, like a couple of years back, everyone was at other's throats, and that's not the way things are going to get done. Definitely not.
That's the God's honest truth. You got so many people over there, instead of, their heart isn't really into cryptozoology. I think they're into really making money off of cryptozoology, and they're passing stories that are really not true, and just to get people terrified and afraid and entertained, I guess. But they're just in it for the money. They're not in it for the love of cryptozoology or for the science or for the matter of the fact that thousands and thousands of people have seen Bigfoot. Thousands and thousands have seen Dogman over the years. And I don't think all of those people are out there looking for their minutes of fame. It's just, I know what I saw, and people aren't going to change my mind as to what I saw because I saw it. And Daryl and Jeremiah, my God, they were going after him left and right last year.
Yep, they were. To the point where I was having a psychological breakdown. I would call Nick at night and be like, Nick, what do they're pounding on the walls, they're screaming in the windows. What the hell do I do? And they had never, the Dogman seemed to come around when the Sasquatch leave for the season,
Yeah.
So it was the Dogman messing with me. So
turns, right?
Exactly. But so the only, the best Dogman guy I know is Nick. So I had called him. Geez, Nick, what's going on here? But anyway, yeah. So Daryl, you want to give us just a quick bio on yourself, and we'll move on from there?
Yeah, sure. I've lived in Tennessee all my life, mainly in Robertson County. My grandparents lived in other counties, Cannon County, which I had my first encounter in. I've lived here in this area about 42 years that I live in now. Currently, I also stay up on the Virginia, North Carolina coast with my kids. I was a mayor in my town, in my area, District 5, I think it's called, for alderman, commissioner, mayor for 26 years.
Okay.
Know pretty much everybody around the area. They know me. Of course, not everybody's on your side in that position, but most of them were. And I ran for office, I think 6 times or 7 times, and I never lost an election because I always stood behind the people. But I got out of that about 2016, and basically been researching Bigfoot since probably around 98 or 99, somewhere in that area, when my second encounter happened. So I kind of quit in 2020 because I had a lot of bad stuff going on at my house and my farm. That's pretty much it.
Well, before we get into the questioning, I wanted to ask you something about while you were mayor in Tennessee. Daryl, did you ever think to look into the archives, the records, to see if anybody had ever reported Sasquatch, Dogman sightings or anything like that up there? Because that's what I like to do. When I was in Paris, Tennessee for the conference, I visited a couple of libraries, got into their old microfilm, microfiche. Anytime I go to another state, I like to hit the old libraries and bookstores. And I was just wondering, as mayor, did you ever use your authority there to check into that?
I actually did. And I happen to be really close friends with Martin Groves. And Martin lives about 10. And Martin was, he was a county sheriff's department employee, deputy sheriff, and had even a higher rank before he retired. He and I were real close, and we had some conversations about that over the last 20 years, probably so. There were several sightings in our area, not of Dogman, but of Bigfoot. At least they said there were sightings. And we had had several officers outside the city, not inside the city, that had went out, county officers. They had told me about certain areas that people were having some problems with mainly Bigfoot. Never heard any Dogman encounters that I'm aware of. But there were quite a few sightings close to me, and within 20 miles of me, there were numerous sightings. People would call in seeing something, but as far as any tragedy of death or anything like that, I'm not aware of anything like that. It's mainly encounters or road crossings, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So they just had sightings then.
Correct.
Not like a real encounter or whatever, or like that.
Well, a man that lived in a trailer, and he was an elderly man that lived just outside the city limit of our city, which the county covered that area outside. The county patrol did. And he called in numerous times because this creature was coming on his back porch at night and taking his dog's food.
Oh.
And, one of the officers had told me, he described it as looking like a Bigfoot, or described it like what they're supposed to look like. And he didn't know what it was, but it would come up regularly and take his dog food. And he tried to run it off, and it kept coming back. And what I understand, one of those officers did actually see the creature. So that's the one that stands out probably the most. Other ones had called in and said they had seen it, or had seen one crossing the road, or one next to the lake. We have a little lake in our area. But that one was pretty credible because the man kept calling in several times a week because he was frightened by the creature.
Yeah.
So,
I wish I would have known them, because I would have told the guy, okay, keep putting the dog food out there in the dog bowl, when the Sasquatch comes. But this time I want you to put red hot cayenne pepper in that dog food. Moisten it up a little bit and put it in there. That'll fix them.
Been good. Yeah.
That'll fix them. My God. See, that's even that dog food out there is akin to, giving them food as gifts, and that's not thing to ever do with a Bigfoot. Well, that would
they get so used to it.
That would have been good though, giving them a hot mouth on that one.
That would have.
Oh yeah. I gotta remember that one.
Most people don't think that way. I'm just very bad, and I think evil things like that to do, because
that's why we love you, Nick.
You gotta protect you. I was just on a show with Dark Waters, and he was asking me questions about how somebody would protect themselves if a dogman was harassing them and coming on their land and stuff, and maybe killing some of their farm animals or coming up to the windows and this and that. We went through a whole slew. I mean, Dark Waters came up with a darn good topic, and we went through a whole slew of things that you can do, to keep them away and everything. And it was some excellent things. I'm going to have to write it up and post it one of these days for people. This way they have a little handy checklist of things that you can do, and it's not that expensive to do them either.
I remember you told me I had that black one. He kept sticking his face to the window, and I said, Nick, this is about the fourth time he's done it. What do I do? You're like, well, I tell you what you're gonna do. It's gonna go one of two ways though. take that laser on your rifle, stick it between the eyes. He's either going to come no at you or he's going to bolt in the other direction. And luckily, he took the latter and bolted in the other direction. So you were right.
I don't think they know how thick the walls are or the windows or how easy.
Yeah.
I don't think they're up to that level, but my God, I know in Pennsylvania, the black bear, there's several people that have called me about it, and I've seen other people that haven't called me about it, but they've posted pictures because they have cams inside their house. Black bear came up, he's sniffing around, knows nobody's home, just swatted at the door, and the door goes flying open. It's a bad door with two, a deadbolt and a regular doorknob lock. But when you're up against something that big, 10 times stronger than a man, and it swats the door, that door's going.
Yeah.
And I've seen other pictures and movies where a bear would come up to a truck and open the door. They know how to open doors, so they learn.
I've heard something like that about Bigfoot getting in people's vehicles and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
That's horrible.
Yeah, some real good. But actually, was a gentleman in my group that he swore it was the truth. He said one would come into his house and make a peanut butter sandwich.
Oh my God!
Really?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. But it happened. They would come in and just spread it on a piece of bread and leave. So
how do you get that smell out of there, man? You got to hope you don't have to use your bathroom.
Yeah. That would be pretty.
That smell out of there. Damn.
Sure.
I mean, I know Dogman smells like blood and urine, but Sasquatch, I understand, is a whole new different world. What he smells like. They really smell like super feces. That's been in there for a month. Not good. Not good at all. So enough of that. But Darrell, when's the first time you had a sighting?
Well, my first encounter was in 1992. That was the first encounter I had, and I don't really know, but I believed in Bigfoot. I really didn't think a lot about it. I'd heard about Bigfoot, didn't know where I really believed in it or not. It really didn't lay on my mind enough to really think that much about it. But if they did exist, I'd seen the Patterson Gimlin film of Patty that time, but I thought they were probably more out west in Oregon or California, and not around my area. I would have never thought that.
Well, what were you doing at the time? You out hunting or something, or
just tell the whole story? So
that's
absolutely.
Well, I used to go. Grandfather had a large farm, and it was in Cannon County, Tennessee, which is about roughly 88 miles from where I live now. And I was real close to my grandparents, my grandmother and grandfather. I lived with them till I was about 6 years old, mainly before I went to school. And because my parents also lived there at that time, and they drove to Nashville to work, and they stayed in Nashville all week. So I would stay with my grandparents through the week, and they would come home on the weekend before we actually got our home where we live now. My parents don't live too far from where I'm at now, but I used to go deer hunting there on my grandfather's farm, and I grew up there, hunting. I think I got my first gun when I was 9, and I went into the woods there all over the farm and squirrel hunted and rabbit hunted like any kid did when you're younger, and even camped in the woods by myself a few times at night and built a little fire and stay in my sleeping bag. And I wasn't real far from my grandfather's farmhouse, so it wasn't anything to be alarmed of. And I wasn't ever scared of the woods or staying in the hayloft and sleeping in the hay. Me and my friends, and I had 13 cousins, and all of them were boys, so we would camp out there quite a bit. And a lot of times I did it by myself, but with them all. But to start the story off the way it started, every year, me and three of my friends would go to my grandfather's house, and this all started in about 1990. And my grandfather was uh, lived there by himself at that time, and my grandmother had moved to town because my grandfather was pretty set in his ways, didn't want modern conveniences. And when we even went to town, we took two mules and a wagon to go to the grocery store. So my grandfather was pretty much set in old-fashioned ways the way he grew up. And my friends and I would go up there and take our camper, my camper I had a pretty decent camper, and we would go up there every week of muzzleloader, which is black powder deer hunting. And we'd go up there and stay a week. We'd get there the day before season, so we'd have time to scout out and look for signs and a good place to put our tree stand. And we all had climbing stands, and they would follow us in a truck and a trailer. We all had four-wheelers, and we would pull up to my grandfather's barn, which was probably 50 yards from his house, and we'd park in the front of the barn and shut the gate. Cows wouldn't get out, and we'd set up camp, and he had electricity out there, so we'd plug up the camper and park our four-wheelers outside the fence and stay a week. Like I said, have a big time. We had a lot of fun up there. We all hunted there for 5 or 6 years, roughly. This particular trip, we had hunted there. I think that was our second year there that we've been up there on opening a muzzleloader. And if you don't know what muzzleloader is, it's opening a black powder seed. You only have one shot, and it's either sex deer, which is a male or a female. And it's really the best time to get your big deer, because by the time gun season starts about 2 weeks later, they're harder to get a good shot at one because they're a little spooked by then. So we all got started that morning. Everybody headed off into a different direction, and we had a couple of tree stands we built up there, but we all had areas we hunted in, and we weren't very close to each. We were all good ways off. We'd all go different directions. I had asked my grandfather that morning. I said, I want to get a trophy deer this year because we killed deer the last we were there, and we always seemed to get deer, but they weren't real big deer. I mean, they were good size if you wanted venison, and we were mostly trophy hunters, even though we did do that as far as the venison part. And it back porch, and he said, well, if I were you, and he pointed out, he said, do you see that third hill over there? He said, I would probably go over there, and that I would say that'd be an area for a bigger deer. And I said, okay, how long will it take me to get there? And he said, well, it's probably a good 45-minute to an hour walk. And I said, okay. So that morning I headed out where he had pointed, and behind his house, off from his back porch, just a little ways down, there was a fence that he kept his cows in, and they had a gate you could open and go through. And then you walk through a sage grass field, probably about 200 yards, maybe between 200 and 300 yards before you got to the wood line. And when you got to the wood line, there was a barbed wire fence that you had to cross. And these hills and hollows where I'm talking about are really steep. I mean, some of them are 45-degree angle steep, and there's a lot of bluffs and a lot of hardwoods, pretty steep terrain to climb. So that morning, that day, I walked up over the first hill and down that hollow, got up to the top, and by the time I got to the third hollow, I was pretty winded, and got down, crossed the fence there, a barbed wire fence, the last fence, and went down the hill. And I could see the creek that he had mentioned to me. There was a creek there that ran all year round. It was not a real large creek, probably 10 foot wide, maybe a little wider in certain spots. And he said, when you get there, you'll see an old mill. And he said, the mill will be to your left. And there's an old log house there that's fallen in now. And he said, that'd be probably the best place for you to hunt on that hillside because there's an opening there. And he said, I haven't been there in 20 or 30 years, but I remember the terrain. And so I pretty much got to that spot. I seen a lot of big rocks and realized that was the area where the mill had been. And I could see the remnants of what was left of the old house that he was born in and he lived in for quite a number of years before he moved to this house. And I just kind of did a little scouting, walked across the creek, and I found a real nice game trail. The game trail was right on top of the bank when you went up the creek. And I followed it to a spot, and I turned around and looked to get me a variance of where I would want to put my stand. And I had a climbing stand on my back, kind of like you carry a backpack. And there was a tree that looked real good. It was real sloped on the other side of the creek bank. So I went over there and put my stand around it, and it gave me a pretty good view. And I put the climber on and also the stand around it. And then I walked around trying to see if I seen any signs in that area. And I seen a few rubs and scrapes right straight ahead of me where I'd come from. And I had a drag rag on my boot, what I call a drag rag. I don't know if you know what that is, but you put it on your boot, and when you go through the woods, it has kind of covers up the scent when you walk through there, and it has kind of a trail on it, which attracts the buck deer. And I hang it in a tree limb is what I normally do across from my stand. And after I got the stand in the tree and went back across the creek, I hung it. I jumped up to grab a limb that was probably 10 foot off the ground, and I hung the drag rag in the end of it, and it flew back up, and it was high enough where it could kind of go through that hollow there and leave off some pretty good scent.
Mhm.
So I was pretty much set up for the next day. I went over and got back in my tree stand, and I went up the tree to make sure I could climb it good, because you don't ever run into that problem in the dark. It's hard enough getting up them sometimes without that. So I got up there and I cut off a few limbs at the top, and I was about 25 foot up, and I had a spot where I could put my equipment when I got up there the next morning. And so I went on back to my grandfather's house, and told him to get me up when he gets up. And my grandfather always got up at about 4 o'clock in the morning to go milk his cows, and he said he would. And that night I went out and slept in the camper with all my buddies, and we grilled out and had a good time. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, my grandfather come down and knocked on the side of the camper, and I knew who it was. I got up and I headed back direction. And it was a little different in the dark than it was in the daylight. I knew the area, but I'd never been over those hills before. I'd probably been over the first one when I was younger, but not over 2 of them, 3 of them actually. And after I'd went through the back of his yard there, through the gate, and made it through the sage field, after I'd crossed the first fence, the first barbed wire fence. Now, of course, all the leaves are off the trees this time of year. Not very many leaves on the trees, and you can hear yourself walking in the leaves, and not a whole lot you can do to keep it quiet. And I guess I walked in just a little bit, and I heard something to my left walking. And I stopped, and it didn't sound like a regular animal, like a deer or a small animal. It sounded like something heavy. And I shined my flashlight in that area and didn't see anything. And I was thinking maybe one of his cows had got out and got down in there, because it was that heavy of a step. And I was a little bit curious about it. I thought, well, surely nobody's hunting in here, because my grandfather wouldn't allow them to hunt in here with us in here. And I walked on up, and I crossed that big hill and went down to the middle of the second hill, and I started up, and I heard it again. This time it sounded like it was kind of to the left up on the hill maybe, and I shined the light and I didn't see anything, and I felt a little strange because I couldn't imagine anybody being in there. And imagine I being in that far. So I went on, and by the time I got over the third hill and went down to the bottom and crossed that fence, I went toward the edge of the creek because I knew I could find my stand because it was to the left of the creek. And I had my flashlight. And when I got to the tree, I was a little anxious to get up the tree because I was a little leery on what was there. I didn't know really what was following me or something was in there with me. Kind of a weird feeling I had. I couldn't think it was a cow, but I didn't know if it was a person or not. So I got my feet in the stand and the climbing part, and I climbed up the tree and got set pretty good in the tree. Got turned around. I had a fanny pack on. Remember that? I hung it on a limb. I had binoculars, and I had some lunch I put up there. In my fanny pack, I had a black powder horn and some extra rounds to put in my muzzleloader if I had to refire. And got all set up, and my stand, I was in a real good spot, and I got it set real good, and I have a little bar that pulls out in front of me, and I pulled that out in front of me, and I could lean my gun against that. And I had a strap on my gun, and that I always use when I climb the tree, and I put it around my shoulder and my neck to climb up with it. And it had a little camo thing that pulled out from the little bar that went across in front of me, and it kind of covered your feet and legs up. And I always put black under my eyes when I hunt because a lot of times the sun coming up, which where it would have come up at, would kind of get in your eyes, and the deer can a lot of times spot that. And I was pretty much set up, and I sat there it was probably a good hour and a half by the time I got in the tree and got set up. I didn't hear that sound anymore. I'd heard it off to the left, kind of going to the left of me the last time I'd heard it. And I didn't hear it walking anymore. So that kind of left my mind. I didn't think much about that. And I guess it was right about daylight, right before daylight, the sun was coming up, and you could just see enough to know what you were looking at. And I noticed the fog rising off the creek. I remember that real well. And it was not a real cold morning, but the wind was blowing just a little bit. And shortly after that, I started hearing regular squirrels and things running around in the woods. Everything seemed to be a normal morning. And then to the left of me, there was a huge, tall cane thicket. Now, in Tennessee, we have a lot of cane thickets. And what I talk about by cane thickets, you may know what I'm talking about. They're real tall, like green cane that grow on the side of the creek. And there'll be a lot of them together, sometimes like a big patch of 100 of them, maybe. They're all tight together and you can't see in them. But there was a big, large green cane thicket to the left of me. I noticed it the day before, and it went all the way down the left side of the creek there for a good ways. And I seen a deer come out somewhere over on the other side of that cane thicket. It may have been in it, but it came down, walked across the creek, and went up the bank to the other side and made a right, which was coming back in front of me on the other side of the creek. And then two more walked across behind it. And they were just like deer do, just milling around and in the leaves and eating acorns that had fallen. And it was one of those years where we had a large acorn crop.
Are you all right?
Mm-hmm. Sorry about that.
I watched the deer probably for about an hour. They would walk down the game trail right there, real close to where my drag rag was, and the lead deer was a bigger doe, which a doe, I know you know what it is. It's the female deer. All three of these were doe, and it kind of stuck its nose up a little bit to sniff of it, and didn't seem to bother it. So they walked around for a while, and I watched them. And usually when you see that, I'd seen a scrape not a scrape, but a rub down there close to where I'd put the drag rag up, which meant a buck deer had been in there rubbing his antlers, marking his territory. And about, I'm guessing, probably around 8 o'clock, these deer were going back to the left, all on the game trail. One of them was on the game trail, one was off to the right, and the other one was kind of behind that deer to the right. I could see them all real well. It was kind of clear right there. Kind of a clearing with just a little grass, and then it was hardwoods behind them. The lead deer, which seemed to be the kind of like the leader of those deer, stuck its nose up and smelled. And usually that means there's another deer coming or something. By all the years I hunted, that's normally what it meant, or it smelled me. And I knew it didn't smell me where I was at. But then it took a step forward and looked over toward more in the area where the cane was at, in that area. And I immediately thought, well, there's a buck about to come out over there. And it walked a few steps forward, and then it stopped again, and it pawed the ground. It took its foot and hit the ground 2 times. It was the right foot. And then it looked to the left toward the cane field a little bit like it was startled, and its ears stood up. And I looked over, and the other 2 deer were doing the same thing. They were dead, weren't moving. And I thought, well, here comes the buck deer out. And about that time, the big deer that was the closest to me stuck its nose up and made a blowing sound, like deer. It's kind of like blowing your nose if like a deer will do when they get startled or they're trying to find something.
Like a huffing sound?
Yeah, like a real loud, like that, real loud.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was kind of excited. I thought, well, there's a big buck that's about to come out over there somewhere. And it wasn't but just a few seconds after it done that, it turned to the right and took off running as fast as it could down that game trail to the right past me. And the other 2 deer did the same thing. And that kind of alarmed me because it was like somebody had shot at them the way they ran. They were like they were frightened or something. And I was thinking, wow, I've never seen a deer do that with just a buck coming. And so I sat there for maybe it wasn't long, 3 to 5 minutes maybe. And then I seen the cane moving, these large, tall cane. It was moving in the center of it, and it was like a lot of them, maybe 10 or 12 of them were just swaying back and forth. And I was thinking, what is that? Because a deer doesn't do that. And I had no idea what it was. And then this thing stepped out. And I tell you right now, I have chills on my arm because I will never forget. I've never seen anything like that. It stepped out right at the edge of the cane. And it took just a little step and just jumped completely across the creek and real close to the game trail, and it made a right and come back across in front of me. It was walking toward the drag rag. I guess it smelt it, and it walked almost to the drag rag, not quite there, and stopped and looked in my direction. And I didn't think it'd seen me at first, but then it walked on over maybe another couple of feet, and it reached up and grabbed the rag and pulled it down and smelt it. And when it smelt of it, it grabbed the limb. Now, this wasn't a massive limb. It was probably 3 or 4 inches where it comes from the tree down out toward the actual creature. It probably had, a lot of just leaves and stuff, and it ripped the whole tree limb out of the tree, just broke it out and threw it on the ground. Then it turned and looked right at me. And by this time, I don't get scared easy, but I was so scared that I literally couldn't even move, and I could barely breathe. I couldn't get my breath because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I kept thinking, what is this? Because I'd never dreamed there was anything like that in those woods up there. But it stared at me maybe 30 seconds or so. Then it showed me its teeth. And when it showed teeth, I thought I was going to, I didn't know what to do. I really thought this thing was going to kill me. I thought it was my last day. And I'm probably about 60 feet from it at most, maybe a little more, a little less. I can see it really good. It's staring at me, and it showed me its teeth, and then it made a growl like I've never heard before. It wasn't like a lion or a tiger or nothing like that. It was more like a growl from its stomach, and it had kind of a eerie sound at the end of the growl. And this thing was staring at me the whole time. And I didn't really know what to do. I couldn't hardly even move. I was so scared. And I reached down to get my gun. And I thought, well, if I fire, and I got one 50 caliber slug in this gun, and if I don't kill it with the first shot, it's going to kill me.
Oh.
So I didn't pick the gun up. I sat there. And I literally was just shaking. I remember it like it was yesterday. After it let out that growl, I thought, well, this is it. It's fixing to come across the creek and just pull me out of this tree. But then it looked at me again. It looked down, and then it looked right back at me, and it let out a scream like I've never heard in my life. Since then, I've heard similar screams on some people's recordings, but not exactly. And it was in a hollow, so it was so loud, the scream was, that it just echoed down the whole hollow. And by this time, I didn't know what to do. I was so terrified that I didn't know where to jump or what to do. And I knew it would catch me. And then it just looked at me one more time. It turned completely around and walked straight back into the brush and through the hardwoods and the brush like it was leaving. Well, I was so scared that I didn't want to take time to climb down the tree with my climber, because that usually takes 10 or 15 minutes to do it right, or you'll slide down the tree if it's not in the tree good enough. So I jumped from about 25 feet up out of the tree with my rifle, my muzzleloader, and I slid all the way down this hill in the leaves and went right into the creek. And I still had my gun up. It didn't get wet, but I was thinking the whole time, don't let your gun get wet. And I was sliding down. And I was so terrified that I literally was just tingling. I remember the tingling feeling I've had. I never had a feeling like that. I didn't know I had that kind of fear in me. But I took off out of the creek. I ran down the creek bank as fast as I could run. And I went up the hill, and there's a little spot that I had to come through to get there at that hill. There's a barbed wire fence there, and I crossed it pretty easy. It was a sagging type fence. It wasn't actually one that had been used. It was a fence. And I went between a little bluff-like and a indenture in the woods there, kind of like a small ravine. I went through that and went straight up that hill, running as fast as I could run. I know I run faster than I ever had that day. And when I got over the top of that, down to the next hollow, I'd started up the next hollow, and I looked back, and on top of that hill, there it was. It was looking at me. And I was scared to death because I was looking behind me the whole time. And when I got started up that hill, it was just on top of the hill looking at me. Now, I don't know if it was the same creature. It may have been another one. I've wondered that before. It might have been not the same one, but it was just standing up there next to a tree looking at me. And I just ran as fast as I could. I ran over the top of that hill, that fence, and got down to the bottom of the other one, where I had to cross the last barbed wire fence. Well, I was running so fast down that hill, I was going to jump the last barbed wire fence. And I did. I jumped it, but it caught my the bottom of my pants, and I tore a big hole out of my pants and about a 10-foot gash in my calf, but I never slowed down. I kept going. I kept looking back behind me. I was running as fast as I could, and I remember being so winded, I didn't think I could run anymore. And I got to the edge of where the sage grass met the gate that I went through to get to my grandfather's back porch. And I looked back again. I didn't see it, didn't see the creature. I got through the gate, pulled the gate to, and ran into the back door of my grandfather's house. He had an old farmhouse with a tin roof, and the back porch was covered with tin. It was kind of a set area. Went through the back door, shut the door, and locked it. Looked out the window. At the door window, didn't see the creature, and I ran into to the right of my grandfather's. When you go through the back, you're in his kitchen, and when you go to the right, it goes into the living area where he was sitting. And I ran into there, and my grandfather had a big old timey, old timey like pot belly stove right in the middle of his living room with a flue that went out the top of the ceiling. And he was sitting there in the rocking chair with his coffee can, he dipping his snuff, and I was just terrified. I ran over behind that and sat down in the corner. And my grandfather said, we were very close, and as long as I lived, he never called me by my name. He called me boy. And he said, "Boy, what's wrong with you?" And he said, "You're white as a ghost. What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I don't know what I just seen, but I seen some kind of monster in those woods down there, and you don't need to go down there." And he said, "What'd you see?" And I told him. He goes, "Oh, you seen one of them." I said, "What do you mean I seen one of them?" He said, "You seen a wood booger." He said, "The old people around here call them the wood booger. My mom and dad and my great uncle, they all call them wood boogers, and we call them boogers." And he said, "Yep, I seen 4 of them in my lifetime." He said, I hear them a lot, but I don't see them." And he said, "You don't have to worry, they won't hurt you." And I said, "This thing was going to kill me." And he said, "Oh no," he said, "you got in its territory, and it lets you know you better get going." That I'd never thought that there would have been one down there. I wouldn't have sent you there. But he said, funny thing about them is they don't bother you as far as harming you, but they don't like you in their territory. He says every winter they get hungry, and my grandfather had a old log split hen house to the left of his house, and he had about 50 or 60 chickens. And he said in the wintertime, they come and take a couple of chickens. He said they get hungry. There ain't a lot of food. And he said, didn't know what it was for a long time till I seen one of them one time. And he said they leave a little stack of rocks and sticks like they're paying you for it. I said, like they're paying you? And he said, yeah. He said they do that. And he said, I hear them sometimes screaming. And I said, well, why didn't you ever tell me these things were out there? He said, well, if I'd have told you they were out there, you would have never hunted in the woods and camped in the woods, and you wouldn't have stayed in the hayloft with your cousins, your friends, and didn't ever think you'd see one. But that's the reason why I didn't tell you.
Yeah.
My granddad was 90. He was 92 at that time, and he lived about another 6 years. But he was in great health for his age. He was still doing all the regular farm chores. But he told me that when he was a little boy in that house down there that I was actually hunting over the old foundation of it, what was left of it, that I think he told me he was 7 or 8 years old, but it was just an old log cabin type house that been there for years. And his uncle ran in the house one night. One of those things had chased him home, and he had run in the house and barred the old wood door, and they could hear it walking around all that night around the house. And in the daylight, it went on. But he'd been out squirrel hunting, and one of them got after him. But I'd never seen one there, and never would have dreamed that thing lived there. But that changed my life so bad that it took me, I don't know how long to get over it, but I had nightmares for a long time, for weeks. And I was still there with my friends, and we still had 6 days of hunting left. And I went out and sat down by them. I'd seen them come in on the four-wheelers, and they'd been hunting, and one of them had got a deer, and they were skinning it out, hanging in a tree back there. And I went up and they asked me if I'd seen anything, and just regular conversation. And I asked them, I said, have y'all ever seen anything in these woods down here? And I'm still real shook up. They looked at me and said, what's wrong with you? I said, oh, nothing, I'm good. I said, have y'all ever seen anything down here since we've hunted here? And what are you talking about? I said, something looked kind of like a Bigfoot or something. And they started laughing at me, and they said, you drank too much last night. And I said, no, I'm telling you, I've seen it. And then I just let it go. I didn't say anything else about it because I could pretty much tell how that was going to go. So I didn't want to be about them tell everybody I knew I'd seen one. But that was definitely a life-changing experience. That I didn't hunt. I didn't hunt for, I don't know how many years. I didn't go in the woods for 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Life-changing experience, I would say, yes, Daryl. So
It is.
I just want to clarify, what you saw was what we refer to as a Bigfoot, if I'm not correct. And could you describe it, the height, the possible, what you estimated the weight, what color it was, if you smelled it?
I remember it like it was yesterday. I still occasionally have dreams about it. I'm guessing it was close to 8 foot tall. It was because that tree limb was about 10 foot off the ground that I hung the drag rag from. Because I'm 6'6", and I judge distance because my arms are long, and I had to jump up to get that tree branch. So it was real close to 8 foot, or maybe a little more or a little less. But it was solid black. It was as black could be. I mean, it was really dark black. It did not have red eyes. I've heard that all my life. It didn't. It had dark eyes. You could see the whites, but it had dark eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Its face looked kind of like black leather, just around its face, around the eyes and the nose. It had hair below that. It did not look like the patty type Bigfoot. I actually, after this happened to me a couple of weeks after it happened, I actually went to the library where I lived. I actually went to a couple libraries and started pulling books out to see what I'd seen. And I did find a book, and I don't remember the name. I think it was Ready or something book, but I remember looking through all the pictures, and they had like several different types of Bigfoot that had been seen, and I found the exact picture in there what I'd seen. It was called a type 2 wood booger, and that somebody had made a drawing of, but it looked just like it. And I knew then that my grandfather was right on it, what he had told me it was called, which I didn't think that he wasn't. But after I seen those pictures and read about them, and I read about them a little bit, and it said that most of those type wood booger type creatures were mainly in the South, Tennessee, and it named 3 or 4 different states that they were in. But I'm guessing it was not a massive big bow looking one like the patty one or one of those type. It had a real big chest, big arms, but the legs were not real big. The head was more human shaped. It wasn't like the cone shaped type head. It had real evil looking eyes, and the most evil looking face I've ever seen. I've never seen a face like that. It looked like it was just ready to kill you. It had the most evil face, and it was just solid black completely. Its teeth were stained. I could see regular human type like teeth. They weren't fangs or anything like that. It had, like I said, the skin that I could see. It actually looked more like like hair on it than it did fur, but it was
Mhm.
matted. It was matted down top, like black matted down, like dirty looking fur and hair or whatever it was, and but and it looked fairly similar to a human's size head. It didn't have a massive head, but I'm thinking it probably weighed, 400 or 500 pounds just because its buttocks, that area of it, and its chest was so big, and it did have big arms up toward the bicep area, but I couldn't believe the strength. I still today think how it just ripped that tree limb like it was nothing, and
Yeah.
it was it was not a massive tree limb, but a 3 or 4 inch tree limb that where it goes from a tree out, it just ripped it right off like it was nothing to it. I think that was that after it did that, it sent a shock wave through my body of how scared I really was. But
Now,
I've never back
Daryl,
to
do you
that.
think maybe you pissed it off by putting that drag rag up there because it had a scent and odor, and maybe it got fooled, and it's like, oh, I thought it was something I can eat, and this guy's messing with me.
It's very possible, Nick. Over the years, I've ran through this in my mind so many times of what I could have done different or what it did, and I think for sure that what I heard going in, it followed me in. I think it knew where I
Sure.
was.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean,
I don't.
Yeah.
Sasquatch, that's not a good thing to do. It may sound funny on a commercial, but messing with Sasquatch, no. Yeah,
No.
oh, Daryl, did you ever go back to get your equipment?
I've never been back to that spot ever.
Oh man.
Never. And
I don't think people realize what a life-changing experience it is seeing one of these things, or a dog man, or anything like that. They don't understand until it happens to them.
Well, Jeremiah, an 8-foot creature, it's that big, and
Yeah.
it knows you're up there, and it's looking right at you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's life changing.
It's
Well,
very changing.
my grandfather had made a statement to me because the rest of the week all my friends hunted. I didn't go hunt. I just let them hunt, have a good time, and I'd go out and hang out with them at the camper until it got close to dark, and then I went in and stayed with my grandfather in his house, and I didn't want to hunt. I didn't even want to go outside. So I remember telling them, I said, if y'all be careful down in the woods, and they knew that I'd seen something, but they didn't know what it was because I knew these guys a long time, good friends, and they knew that it wasn't like me to do that. But I didn't hunt the rest of the trip, and I stayed with my grandfather, and he and I talked about this the whole week I was there. And I had asked him, he said, you remember when you were a little boy that your grandmother used to tell you to come in the dark because the booger man would get you? And I said, yeah, grandma telling me that. My cousins too. She goes, well, that's the booger man. So my granddad said that was the booger man. So to me, this still, after what I've had happen to me after that, that was the most life-changing thing that I've ever been through. So I had a real difficult time even believing that I'd seen it. I would second guess myself over and over. Did I really see that? And I know I did, but it was pretty bad when we went up there a couple more years after that and hunted, but I didn't hunt. My friends went hunting, and I told them I just don't care about deer hunting no more, and they were good with that, and I hung out with them. But it was real difficult even going back up there. It just to visit my grandfather. I was afraid to park my truck in front of his house and walk to the door. So,
but Daryl, you also heard it. You not only saw it, but you heard it. And did you smell anything unusual and foul? Just you heard it and you saw it.
No smell whatsoever. No.
But you did hear it, so.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't a figment of your imagination.
Well,
Right.
I knew that. I knew that I'd seen it. I knew I did. But I mean, I think you start thinking about normality because I think people have a real hard time wrapping their mind that something like this actually exists in our woods. With Bigfoot, Dogman, any of the top cryptids, but I've never seen anything but Bigfoot until last October. I seen my first Dogman, so I had no idea that a creature could live out there close to my grandfather's house. Within over half a mile, from his house. But it was difficult to. I had really a hard time. Back in those days, is a little different now too. You couldn't tell anybody,
Right.
because anybody you tried to tell it to, they were just like, okay, yeah, all right.
You tried to tell it to your friends too, and they were like,
yeah. Everybody thought that you were just crazy. They knew I was honest, but they thought I'd seen something else. I'd talked to people, a few people mentioned it, people I work with, and they said, "Oh, you've probably seen a bear." And there's
no there. Okay. Now, Daryl, that was 1992, correct?
November the 6th of 1992 at 8:23 in the morning.
All right.
I remember well.
You're talking about you did see a Dogman. What year was that and where?
That was last October. That was October of 2021.
Right. Describe the word. What happened with that one?
Well, I'm staying up here with my kids, with their mom. I come up here and stay with them here on the East Coast, on the ocean here, and stay with them. And I go to a little store in the morning, and before I go to work, and I go in there in the morning and drink coffee. There's a few older guys in there. We sit at the table and drink coffee and just things, and football games, from that to just regular things, and like just old conversations with the retired guys, and got to be pretty good friends with those guys. And the store clerk there, I don't know his name. He's an Indian man, but he's a store clerk. He owns the market. This man and his son came in, and I heard them talking to him because I was sitting close enough to hear the conversation. And the man said, my aunt is having problems with some type of creature killing her goats. And he was asking her, and he it's hard to understand him all the time, but it's a little different, and I can't understand what he's saying at times. The man said, I don't know, it's some kind of creature. We've been up all night with my aunt because some type of creature has killed some of her goats. And I heard him, and the guys around me heard him too. And I said, well, what kind of creature was it? I asked the guy, and he turned and looked. He had his son with him. His son was maybe 5 or 6 years old. And he's turned and he said, I don't know. I haven't seen it, but we found the goat. There was 2 goats dead behind her goat house. And I said, well, you would think it was a dog, or what do you think killed it? And he started conversating with me and the guys at the table. And I said, well, where do you live? And he told me where he lived. And I said, he said, do you know anything about these creatures? I said, well, I don't know what kind of creature killed it. I said, I don't mind coming out and looking. And he said, well, I'd appreciate it if you would, because nobody seems to want to go out and see what it is. And I don't know much about creatures. And I said, okay. And he gave me an address and told me I could come by anytime the next day, which was that next day was a Saturday. And I said, okay, I'll come by there. And I don't know this area real well. Mm-hmm. GPS'd it in with my cell, and it was about a 40-minute drive. And it was a creek I had to cross that you had to drive through. You drove through a creek, and you went up, and it went into it was a driveway going through the creek, and it went around to a farmhouse. And I seen his truck parked there, what he was driving that day. And when I pulled up, he was out there, and I walked around the shed that he called the goat house. It was mainly a shed. It really wasn't a barn. And the goats were not there then. They'd already done something with them. But he was showing me the tracks. And I started looking at these tracks. And I at first thought it was, I really didn't know what it was because I'd never seen a track like that. But I thought it was canine because of the way the back part of the foot was, but the front of the foot had more of a claw, like longer. And he asked me what I thought it was. And I said, I really don't know. And I said, I had an idea. I didn't know much about Dogman. I still don't, just what I've learned from your group and you and staying on top of your group, but don't know a lot about them. And he said, well, if you want to, that you can go through that. He pointed to a gate. He said, you can drive your truck through that gate. There's a hill up there that we park on to feed the goats grain and hay. If you want to pull up there, you can look over and you can see the farm pretty well, and you can see anything coming in if you want to pull up there. And I said, well, I'll be glad to do that. I don't know that I can do anything, but I'll do that for you. So I pulled up there and sat that evening and didn't see anything, nothing. And I had left, and a day or two later, he came in the store by himself. He said, did you see anything? I said, no, I didn't see anything at all. And he said, well, you're welcome to come back out anytime you want. And we're not having any more problems at the moment, but it did get 2 of our goats. And I said, okay. So I went out there probably, I don't remember if it was 2 days in a row. I went in the morning and the evening. I didn't have anything to do at that particular time. I just had shoulder surgery, and I was recovering from that. And set my truck with my binoculars and looked and didn't see anything. And then I went back maybe about a week after that and drove up in there in the afternoon. It was getting dark then, around 5:30 here our time, because the daylight saving times had already changed. And I got there somewhere around 3, I'm thinking, because my kids had got off the bus. I went and picked them up that day, and I drove out there. And I got there a little later than I wanted to, but I sit on the hill, and there's a real large field in between this hill, and there's a little trail that goes up it where these goats run up to the top of this hill I'm sitting on. And there's a feeder trough there, and there's a big thing of rolled hay, and they'll come up there and eat it. And he had blocked the goats off from going in there. I don't know how many he had left, but he had kept them out of that area because that had happened. And he had moved them to another field down the road somewhere. I never did see them. But that afternoon, I was watching the field real well, and the field backed up to a wooded area, but it was a big open field, mostly grass with some sage grass in it. And then to the left of that was his house and the shed where the goat was, with a big, it had like a wire fence all the way down it where you couldn't get to that part. And I was watching he said, I was watching the corner of that field. He had told me that she had heard noises back toward those woods at night before. And she's an elderly lady. I met her. She's in her 80s. Lives there by herself. Her husband's passed away, and he and his wife and son stay with her quite often. And I watched the field, and right before dark, it was just light enough to where I could see it. I seen something come out of the edge of the corner of the woods, come across the field real fast on all fours. I couldn't make out for sure what it was, but I knew it wasn't a Bigfoot. And I got my binoculars, and it was just light enough. It was still almost dark. I could make out what it was. And it ran all the way to the edge in front of me, probably 100 yards in front of me, to the edge of another wood area. And when it got to the edge, it stood up on 2 legs and never seen me, but just kind of looked back toward the field and went into the trees. That's all I ever seen of it. And I went out there numerous times after that. I never seen it. I was kind of excited because I'd finally seen one, and so I went out there. About 2 weeks later, it rained for about a week, and it was just really bad weather. And it cleared up, and I went out there one day, and I was sitting right at the edge of the creek, about to cross it, and a state game warden or game and fish guy pulled up, and I was sitting in my truck there next to the creek, and about to cross over, and he had pulled up. He said, "What are you doing out here?" And I told him that this lady and her nephew had given me permission to come out there and scout her land. And he said, "What are you scouting for?" And I told him, "Well, I'm just out here looking around." And he said, "Do you deer hunt?" And I said, "Yeah, I do, but I haven't in a long time." They gave me permission. He goes, "Well, you don't need to be out here." I said, Why do you mean? What do you mean I don't need to be out here?" He said, "Do you have written permission?" I said, "No, I don't, but I can get it. They told me I could come out here." And he said, "Well, you need to get written permission, but I wouldn't suggest you be out here because some of the other neighboring farmers have had a problem with some type of animal killing their livestock." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he said, we're in the area pretty thick right now." And I remember him saying that because we've had several complaints out here. So I didn't think much more about it. You know, he was pretty thorough. I thought it was kind of strange how he was asking me so many questions, and then because I didn't have any rifles or anything, I did have two pistols with me. I had a 45 and a 9mm, but I'm licensed lifetime gun carrier, and he didn't have a problem with that. And I didn't think much more about it. So I went out there again, probably a couple days after that, and it was a real hot day for that time of year, in the 70s and real warm. And so I got out of my truck and I walked the whole field where I'd seen that thing cross. And I went all the way into the wood line. I had my pistol with me because I don't know if these things are vicious or not. I've been told they were. And I walked that wood line and walked into the woods, and I did find a game type trail. And I went around to a side of like a kind of a big, it was like a boulder field almost, but it wasn't a mountain, like a bunch of big boulders that were been there for a long time. I found quite a few tracks of the same track that I'd seen at that barn, but I didn't find anything else, and I never seen it again. So I went out there numerous times and never seen the creature again. So I don't know if the game wardens killed it, or they captured it, or that somebody else did, or what happened to it. But that's my only sighting of a dogman.
Well, Daryl, once again, can you give us a description, the height, possible weight, what it was?
From the distance it wasn't real big. I'd always thought dogmen were like 7, 8 foot tall, or like a massive. This one was not that big. I'm guessing it was maybe at the most 6 foot tall.
So it's standing on 2 feet, though.
On 2 feet.
2
I
feet.
was saying it was maybe about 6 foot tall, and it was also black. It did have some white on it, right around what I could see with my binoculars, around its face area.
Mm-hmm.
It did.
Ears?
It had ears. I could see that. It looked like a German Shepherd. It looked like a German Shepherd.
All right, let me, well, you probably can't see it. I don't know, Jeremiah, if you might have it, but I don't know if you could see this very well. Would this be it? Or, well, I'm trying to get this to come up here. Any of those?
Let me see the top one again.
It's a bad.
Yeah, that would be more like it.
Yeah.
The very first,
smaller versions, right?
the first one, yes.
Hmm.
This is a rural part of Virginia, rural. it's not real far from it's not real far from, what is the name of that? It's Shenandoah National Forest.
Okay. Not activity there.
Not real far from there, maybe 30 miles, 20 miles. And then it's probably about that distance before you start going up the Blue Ridge Mountains, which I have to cross, go back home. And, but it's pretty rural out there because I had a hard time finding it at first because my GPS kept going out and my cell would get service. But after I found it, I didn't have a problem. But I think I was kind of surprised at that because I was thinking they were a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, well, it could have been a juvenile, could have been a female. Also, what I wanted to ask you, did it see you? Did it notice you up out there?
It looked in my direction, but I don't think it seen me. Now, I had binoculars on it the whole time.
Oh, okay.
And I was looking through binoculars right at its face when it stood up. I didn't realize it was going to stand up. I thought it was some type of large dog or idea. But when it stood up and just turned to the right just a little bit, I realized what I was looking at. It was a Dogman. Because
how did you feel looking at this thing standing up on 2 feet, even though it's not looking at you?
I was a little bit, to be honest with you, I was a little bit excited because I'd finally seen one.
Yeah.
But I wasn't real scared because it was a good distance from me. But I was more kind of more curious than anything because then I was ready to go back again because I wanted to see it again. But I really deep down in my, I think the game warden, I think they probably got it because the lady had told me when I went back to see her the last time I was there, she said they had been to her house twice. The game warden had 2 different ones. And then some guy from the state came out there. She called it the state. I don't know if it was a county, the city, or what it was. It wouldn't be city because this is rural, but it might have been the county or state. I don't know. But they had asked her some questions, and she didn't know what it was. Matter of fact, her nephew didn't know what it was either. But the tracks were, I wish I had kept one of the tracks because I'd seen some more tracks like that going into those big rocks I was talking about. But I was a little leery to go back in there any further by myself because what I'd heard about, they're going to attack you. And of course, Martin Groves had told me the stories and I know how credible he is and he's a very good friend, but I never thought I'd see one because I've been to LBL plenty of times and I've never seen one. So, it made me curious about them.
Yeah.
That's about all I can say. I didn't really, I really wasn't able to see it as well as I would like to have. I could see the body real clear because there wasn't any grass right there.
Right.
But when he went into the hardwoods, I lost it real quick. But, why it looked up at me, I don't know. It may have smelt me. It may have knew I was there. It didn't look right at my face. It just looked in my direction. So, because I was looking at it through the binoculars and I could see what it was doing. And
I think you were about 500 feet away or more?
About 100 yards.
100 yards? Okay.
Yeah. About 100.
How wide were the shoulders when it stood up?
It was really difficult for me to tell from there. Honestly, if somebody was to ask me to describe that, I would say a extra large German Shepherd. That's how the back legs I could see were big because when it stood up, it kind of turned to its right and looked my direction. Okay. And I could see then real good that it wasn't a regular dog.
Right.
It was bigger than a regular. The only thing that made me say German Shepherd because the head looked so much like a German Shepherd.
Yeah.
Or maybe, you don't know how within range you were of that thing because if you're saying 100 yards, that's a football field. That's 300 feet.
Yeah.
In my day, I could sprint 100 yards 9.7 seconds. All right. And I thought that was pretty fast, but it's
That is fast.
nowhere near Olympic level, but it's pretty fast. Now, what I'm trying to say is a Dogman can really move. I know when I was in LBO with DA Roberts, we believe we had one at nighttime near the Nickel Cemetery, and it maneuvered from our 2 o'clock over to our 9 o'clock within a couple of seconds. It was and it went there. So I mean, these things you don't realize how close you were, because that thing could have probably covered that 100-yard in 4 or 5 seconds and had you if it wanted you. Wow, that is something.
Well,
I applaud you for that one.
I was, I was standing. I got out of my truck and I had my binoculars watching it as it ran across the field. It ran from one corner to about the middle of the field, and there was a lot of big trees right there. That's where it went in. But it ran kind of different. I knew it wasn't a regular dog the way it ran.
Wow.
Right.
It ran with almost a bigger type. It almost had like a gallop.
Ah, okay.
And that got my attention because I didn't really know what I was looking for. I just was trying to find some kind of creature. I knew it wasn't a Bigfoot that killed the goats. I knew that for sure because I knew what a Bigfoot track looks like. But these were different type tracks. And
Did you ever get to see the dead animals?
I never seen any of that.
Yeah. I was just curious if they took them fully from there, if they ripped open their chest and took out the heart and the liver, the spleen and stuff like that, or
all I know what he told me, and he told me, he said, "Don't be telling everybody about this because I don't want to about it at my farm." The first time I was out there, he made that pretty bluntly. He said, "I don't know you real well, but I don't want a lot of people out here looking around and my aunt be scared." But I did not ask him the condition of the animals, and I wish I had of, but that didn't cross my mind at that time. I really didn't know what kind of creature I was looking for. But like I said, I'd never seen a dog, but I did see one, and it was completely like nothing. I thought it would have been a lot bigger than that. So
yeah. Well, you got me by one. I mean, I've seen a Dogman 3 times. You, however, have seen a Sasquatch and a Dogman, and that's pretty rare in one's lifetime. And Jeremiah, I think you've you play around with your little Bigfoot friends up there. And
most of the time it's my little Bigfoot friend. Yeah.
mess with him a lot.
I've had Jeremiah's been in my group a couple times. Live, and I enjoyed. One night he was out there, and I think y'all did see some type of creature when you were on there. I thought you did, but
yeah, we did it. We saw it had to have been 8-9 feet up in the air. We saw the eyes, and they were nice wide set eyes. I knew what I was looking at. He was checking me out.
Yeah.
They'll leave handprints. I was showing Nick the other night. My wife and I went to town to get some groceries. We came back. They had left a handprint on the upper pane of the living room window, and for it to reach up that high and leave that handprint, you're talking it had to have been 7.5, 8 feet, whatever left it there. And it was a weird. The hand didn't look like a human hand. The thumb was turned. You know what I mean? It was turned. You know what I'm saying, Nick? Right? You saw the picture.
That's
so.
Yeah.
The actual track that I seen at that goat where the goats were, it was real muddy right there where animals have been, how animals are making it real muddy, and you can see tracks pretty good. The tracks that I seen were it was almost like kind of a long finger like on the end of the foot
with a claw mark in front of it.
Right. Correct. Yeah. It kind of reminded me of a large raccoon track, except a lot bigger.
A lot bigger, yeah. See, in Jeremiah's case, they're coming by just to say hello, and we're back. Because they leave, and then they come back and they like to say hello to him. So I think they have more fun with you than anything.
Yeah. for sure.
Wow.
Right, I found a Dogman track on the side of my house. So that'd be a little frightening to me, especially with my family there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, that was some interesting stuff, Daryl. I gotta be honest with you. Let me ask you a question back to the Sasquatch encounter. If you had taken a crack, in your opinion, if you had taken a shot at that Sasquatch, would you have been here talking to us today?
Probably not,
Yeah.
because I don't think it would. I weighed that out, not thinking clearly at that particular time. But if the way I felt about it, if it didn't bring it down, it was going to get me.
Yeah.
To get you.
If I'd have had 6 rounds, I possibly would have shot it.
Huh. Were you loaded at the time? That black powder loaded?
It was a 50 caliber Black Knight. Did I lose you guys? My phone's going
Oh,
low.
we're back. We're back.
Oh, you're back now.
Yeah, my battery's getting low.
Daryl, how
Okay.
far away were you from it? Just, before you go though, how far away you think you were from the Squatch?
Oh, I'm guessing 60 feet at most.
50 feet? Yeah.
60. Yeah.
That's close.
I'm figuring that muzzle loader wouldn't have lost too much of its powder, too much of its power. It would have hit it with that 50 cal ammo, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It was a black powder night rifle, and it
Okay.
was first year they came out with the breech load. And
Yep.
you still had to load it from the end, but you put the cap on the inside of the boat. Where the old one I had, you put it on the outside.
Outside. Yeah. Yeah.
Supposed to be a lot more accurate gun, and I had shot it several times to scope it in, but it had a lot of power. But I'm not sure it would have brought that creature down.
Right.
I would have hated to fired and dealt with what happened if it didn't. So
Yeah.
I still have a difficult time with it. So
Sure.
as years went on, I guess it was about 7 years later, I encountered some more of them, and that time was really, I had no problem with them. They were friendly with me. I befriended them. It was really a whole different and a completely different creature. Didn't look anything like what I'd seen. So
Yeah.
it was more like the Patty style. It had more.
Okay.
And those were that was just a complete accident because I wasn't out hunting. I had a place that I fished at on the Cumberland River, fishing at for years, and it's way off down into the woods on a trail right next to the water, and that's when I had my encounter that time. But that's probably really what saved me, that encounter, because my fear was still there about these things. And if I hadn't had that encounter, I don't think that it would have been nearly what it is now. I don't have the fear of the woods like I did then. And I've been in the woods plenty of times researching. But until that encounter in '99, I believe it was, I didn't have any fear with these creatures whatsoever.
Wow. That's some pretty intense stuff.
That is some story. It's full of detail and everything, Daryl. You really
Absolutely. That was one of our better those some great detail, Daryl. That was one of our better shows.
Description and detail. You should
Like
put it
that,
in the book. You really should, because that was excellent.
No, it was excellent. Awesome. We'd love to have you back on at some point if you'd be game.
yeah, sure. I'll be glad to come on. I'll tell you about my second and third encounter when they tore my house up.
Oh,
Absolutely. We'll work out a date for that.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. You guys are great, and I think a lot of both of you. I
Appreciate it. Feelings mutual.
thank you.
think a lot of Nick. I'll never forget. He sent me one of his patches when I first joined his group back however many years ago that was, and kind of like a founder's patch, he called it.
That was. You're
Yeah.
a plank holder.
Do what now?
You're a plank holder. That means one of the originals.
I think I was seriously like the top 10 or 15 people that joined your group.
I believe so.
It's awesome.
I was one of the very first ones, and you know, of course, back then everybody was still into Bigfoot. Now everybody's into Dogman. So
Yeah. Well,
it's
they're seeing a lot more sightings. They're having a lot more encounters with Dogman because of the fact that, and I've discussed this on other shows, the housing industry is building, and they're building too many houses and condos and townhouses, and they're pushing them. And the three things everything needs, every living thing needs, is shelter, water, and food, and in that order. And the more they're taking their shelter away from them, they're pushing out towards where the water is, and that's where I'm getting a lot of calls. And
I think it's
it was excellent, really great having you on, man, because that was fantastic.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like I said, if you ever want to write a book and tell your story, do exactly what you did right now, and have somebody tape record you, and they could, even if you're not a writer, they can put that into a story. I mean, that was perfect. That was wonderful.
It was awesome. Awesome. And Daryl, like I said, we would love to have you back on. We will definitely figure out a date.
Yep.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. I really do. Thank y'all both for being in my group, and thank you for being so
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, Daryl, for coming on. Oh,
Yes.
All right.
I'm
Appreciate it.
honored to
All
be
right.
on.
It's our honor. Our honor. The honor was all ours, man.
All right.
Everybody, this has been On the Trail in Search of Living Legend, Season 4, Episode 5 with Nick and myself. If you would like to come on the show and tell your story, you can get a hold of either one of us. Reach me at onthetrail.jeff@gmail.com. And Nick, you have an email you want to throw out there, buddy?
yeah, you guys could just reach me on Facebook Messenger. And you can also reach Jeremiah on Facebook Messenger for that matter.
This is true.
So, and we'll contact you. We will contact you right away.
I gotta
Yes,
put a
absolutely.
plug in for my group.
Oh,
Down in
yeah.
my Bigfoot believers and other creatures join us right now. I appreciate it.
Great group.
Great group.
Join up with them.
All right,
Yep,
thank y'all.
definitely. All right,
Yeah.
you guys. Have a good night, gentlemen.
Good night.
Good night.